I always like to see a good portrayal of a good team in media, be it a movie, a TV show, a game, whatever. I just like to see when people understand what makes a team good and depict that well in their work of art. And I also like to use them as examples in my training. War movies are particularly great at this because nothing builds a great team more than facing and overcoming adversity together and growing as individuals through that process. And war is a perfect laboratory to accelerate and intensify that to the maximum. Disaster movies have the same kind of quality, and you can find great teams in some of these movies. But as much as I like using these movies and the teams in them as examples, you always have that question in the back of your head that it's acted, right? Even if it's realistic, and more than that, even if it's based on actual real documented events, it's still scripted by a writer and acted by an actor. And you always have that doubt that I'm not saying it didn't happen like this, but did it happen exactly like this, and how relevant it is to less intense day-to-day life. And while I do believe that the same mechanisms that we see in great teams put in extraordinary circumstances apply to normal day-to-day teams and circumstances, so to say, just lower intensity, lower speed, the question is still there. And that's why I'm really happy when I find an example of a great team on YouTube in unscripted content. And this is where Matt's Off-Road Recovery comes into play. Because what they do is not life or death, so it's more relatable. It's just like a job. But at the same time, it's an exciting enough job to be entertaining and to test those people in some difficult situations. And of course, it's unscripted content. They're just filming their job and putting it on YouTube. And yes, we shouldn't fall into the parasocial trap of thinking that we know these people. No, we don't, and we shouldn't want to. That would be an unhealthy obsession with someone we see online. We don't know who these individuals are, but we can see enough of the content they choose to put online on their channel to get a deeper understanding and a more nuanced understanding, I think, of what kind of team they are, what kind of leadership they practice, compared to a movie. So what is Matt's Off-Road Recovery? Matt's Off-Road Recovery is a small family business and a YouTube channel, and they do off-road recoveries in the deserts of Utah. You go off-roading, you get stuck, you call them to get you out. It popped up in my recommended some time ago. I started watching it and it captivated me. I started looking at these 20-30 minutes, sometimes more episodes, but they're just so entertaining, despite the fact that pretty much the same thing happens every episode, like, one or two or three people are stuck and they go out and unstuck them, roughly speaking, using the same kind of equipment, the same kind of techniques, and kind of the same thing happens every time. And I'm not even an off-roader, so the technical specifics of what they do there are not directly relevant to me, but yet I was captivated. And I was watching episode after episode after episode after episode, and every time it feels fresh and new, even though it's kind of the same thing. And I started wondering, why is that? What is it in these videos that attracts me, despite the fact that I live half a world away and I don't do anything related to what they do? And the answer I reached is that I think it's about good teams and good leadership and good culture. And let's dive into that. Good teams. The core of the team is Matt.
So we got a call for a Jeep Gladiator that is stuck on a trail by Kingman, Arizona. We are on our way to see if we can get it out.
And his wife Jamie and their kids, which are more or less involved at various times. This is a small family-owned business, but there's other people in this team and in these videos which are central to the whole thing, which are not part of the family, but they've changed across time. So the team has changed across the last 3 or 4 years since they've been posting regularly on the channel. But one thing that I love is that all of them, past and present, they all act and behave like they want to be there. Nobody's trying to be a prima donna, nobody's on an ego trip, nobody's trying to win an argument, none of that bullshit. They all act like honest, earnest people who just want to be there, do a good job, learn from each other, help each other, and go home at the end of the day knowing they did well. And you might say that, yeah, that happens because it's a small team, a family-owned business, and that's part of it for sure, but I don't think that's the whole thing. I don't think a small team is a guarantee for a healthy team. I think this is something to be appreciated, and it's so refreshing. And the people in his team are very different. We have young people, old people, people of different ages. We have people who are very new and beginner, people who are very experienced. We have people who are more mechanically inclined and on the building and repairing car site, people who are good drivers, people who go a lot out in the field, people who stay more in the workshop. We have all kinds of people, and they work together very well. So that's a few things you see about the team, but now let's talk about leadership and let's talk about Matt himself. First thing you see about Matt is that he leads by example. He's there in the front doing the hardest part of the work, and you know he's not going to ask any of his team members to do something he hasn't done 100 times before or he wouldn't do himself right now if he had to. So he's leading by example, leading from the front. And the second thing I see in his leadership style, and I like a lot, is respect for the client. And I don't want to get into a generic thing about, the client is always right. I mean it in a very specific way. This job where people frequently get stuck doing stupid things in stupid ways that they shouldn't be doing, it's very easy to make fun of them. It's very easy to have a little bit of a snarky comment, a little bit of a joke about how they got stuck doing something silly, something stupid. Maybe not necessarily to their face, but definitely behind their back. And to some degree, you may feel that making a few remarks like that here and there, it's not such a big deal, it's not necessarily mean, maybe it's just a little bit of fun. But I disagree. I think going down that route of making fun of the client is a slippery slope, and soon enough, that kind of attitude of lack of respect is going to expand and contaminate other parts of the business, and is going to affect not only the client relationship, obviously, but the team itself. So I really appreciate that he doesn't do that at all. And again, I don't know what he says when the camera is off, but I've seen enough situations of him handling different kinds of customers, which sometimes did some really stupid things, with enough respect and consideration to think that he knows how to do that well. Matt is never angry. And I don't mean that he never feels anger. Probably does. I don't know. Doesn't really matter.
I am scared, and I feel like I have that right.
We don't control what we feel, but we control how we behave. And I'm only interested in his behavior. And he never gets angry and he never snaps, not even in the most stressful of situations. And there's many other things I could mention, but I just want to focus on one more, which is I just love how Matt deals with ambiguity. In this job of theirs, there's a lot of improvisations, like how to exactly hook up to that car, how to exactly pull it, what is the best way to do it, what is best to do in any given situation.
I almost feel like we might be able to back it. I'm gonna walk up there and see.
And you usually get a limited amount of time to look at a situation, and then I have to make a decision, which you're never 100% sure it's the best decision. So all this trial and error and figuring things out on the fly and making plans that change all the time.
I'm gonna get behind you and get you back up on this ledge. And then we don't know, and we simply don't care at this moment.
I just love how he deals with that, and I think it's a great example of incremental decision making. And there's a big communication part to that as well, which is explaining your thought process to your teammates in a way in which you convey the ambiguity you have, the uncertainty you have, together with the parts in which you are more certain, in a way in which they can understand and take over those instructions you give them, but also the uncertainty you put around them. So when you're told to do something in this way, you don't just blindly execute a series of steps. You're kind of encouraged to think about it. And I've always thought that language itself is very important in leadership. What are the words? What are the expressions that you use to describe something, to convey something, to give instructions, to ask people to do something, to ask questions, to ask for opinions? And I think Matt is really good at that. He's really good at describing a situation which cannot be described exactly in a sort of scientific way, so to say, but he finds the right words and the right expressions that you understand what he wants anyway. I think he's really good at that.
We've got to slither off that. You're just gonna do like a medium rare, not too aggressive. Okay, just kiss this rock.
And last but not least, I think that the third component which makes me like Matt's off-road recovery videos so much is the culture the team has. And I could speculate where part of that culture comes from, some of its roots, the small, tight-knit communities they come from, their religion, but I don't want to do that. And I don't like doing that kind of stuff in real life too. I like to work with people and look at people for what they are and what they do right now. I don't like to speculate about, hey, you're like this because you come from that kind of background. and that made you what you are today. Because if you think too much about that kind of stuff, I think you get into this kind of an armchair psychology situation where you speculate too much and you start thinking that you know exactly why people are the way they are, and you start having thoughts like you're like this because you had that kind of childhood, and you're like that because you had that other type of childhood, and that explains everything. And I don't think that's the right way of thinking. So I prefer to just take people as they are, you know, come as you are, as Kurt Cobain said, and whatever you say and whatever you do right now, this is the only thing I care about. And I'm going to try to apply the same mentality to Matt and his team. So I'm not going to speculate about anything, but just looking at what they do and how they do it and how they approach problems and how they behave with each other, I see a few dominant cultural behaviors. And probably the most important one of them is this idea of individual ownership, individual responsibility. At every level, from the language they use, from the way they make decisions, from the way they organize themselves, there is no assumption that this is how you do things and you must do them like this because this is how you do things. The implied assumption is always that you must make a decision. Every situation is a decision for you to make and own the consequences of that decision. So think well and act accordingly. And it all ties back to that dealing with ambiguity thing, because of course it's connected, right? How do we deal with the problems of life and of our work when we don't know exactly what the right answer is? And that's a key moment, right? When you don't know what the right answer is, when there's multiple options that might be right, when there's no best option, when there's no great option. What do you do then? And their dominant culture in these situations is look at the situation, inform yourself, ask around, take in all the advice, all the feedback, all the information you can, but then make your decision and own it, live with it. Make your bed and lie in it. And I just adore that personally. I relate to this kind of mentality so much, and I think this is probably one of the most important things that makes me at least like Matt's Off-Road Recovery so much. Yeah, so this is me talking about a YouTube channel, a small business somewhere in Utah where they recover people who get stuck off-road, because I think it's a great example of leadership, a great example of a good team, a great example of a good culture, and I just want to be able to recommend it. And I just love seeing good examples of how people do things and recommending them, so I hope you enjoyed the video.